welcome to Call Me Your Crazy. This is episode 2. Today I'm talking about my background. Next week I'm going to talk about how I had my NDE and how spirit was the basis for healing my mind, body with my spirit. I start out with saying what I'm going to go over next week so that if you're interested, you can tune in. I do not like marketing where they try to lure you in and then you have to show up and then exit. It creates a field of distrust, and I'm not about that. So I'm going to say what the episode is about and then what next episode is going to be about. And if you want to tune in, great. If not, great too. I am not a professional. Hopefully, as things move along, I will get better and more comfortable at this. For now, I'm still really kind of stiff. So need to loosen things up, move things around, which is how you move through trauma and how you regulate your nervous system as you sit with it. So, today I'm talking about my past. It is a very hard topic. This is not for anybody that is under the age of 18. If you are not used to drama and trauma, this may be triggering for you. So please be aware of that when you're listening. Okay? So we're going to get started here. The reason I'm sharing my story is because it's an incredible story. I don't toot my own horn, and it's hard for me to toot my own horn, but it is an incredible story. It's an incredible story of triumph, and it's an incredible story of a lot of things that I've learned along the way. And I believe with all my heart that we are meant to teach each other. I believe that we're meant to teach each other how to navigate the storms that we've been through so that they can navigate them too. I believe that with everything that's happening, we need to be able to help each other and hold each other up and teach each other how to survive the things that we've survived as we go through them. I feel that we are trailblazers, and that if we have the courage, we can leave behind something for other people to follow so it doesn't have to be so hard for them. I really feel that if I'm going to enjoy this life and I'm going to enjoy this place, then I have to do my part to contribute to the good. And what has happened to me and what I've been through can change the world, even if it changes one person, because we're all connected. And just by changing ourselves, we change the world. So this is a difficult story, and I am an optimist at heart. And so when I tell it, I try to tell it from the lens of that. I did have a dark night of the soul where I had to go in and deal with a lot of the feelings that I hadn't dealt with, because as being an optimist, I was always trying to be overly optimistic. And that meant not looking at the pain that I suffered, not feeling the grief that of loss and of pain that I suffered. I'm highly sensitive and emotionally intelligent. So I went into that purposefully so that I could heal it. But most of the time, I walk around telling this story as a very positive thing, because everything that happens to you in life has a positive and a negative balance that comes together, and you get to choose if you want to look at it in a positive way or a negative way. I choose to tell the story my way, but the negative is in there for contrast. So let's see. Before I start the story too, I want to say that I love my family. I have loved them my entire lives. Growing up, I saw the pain that they suffered, and I saw how hard it was for them, and I forgave them. But this isn't about them. This is about me and reclaiming my life and my story and sharing it so that it can help other people. And this is also about me releasing that shame, because it's not mine. It was never mine to bear. And it's something that I've carried with me my whole life. but it was something that was done to me, not something that I did to myself or that I chose. And every action that I chose subsequently was from the shame that was placed on me. So releasing that shame helps me release all the past and all the burdens that were placed on me. Not that I absolve myself of responsibility or culpability, but I take it as a learning lesson and I go forward with understanding that what I chose was because of something that happened to me and the way that my mindset was. And until I could see it, until I could name it, until I could feel it, I was continuing to make those choices. And once I did all those things, I stopped making those choices and started working on a different path to healing. I also want to say that I come from a long line of epigenetics, which is generational trauma, which means that while my parents weren't good parents, they did come from their own generational trauma, and they did what they could do with the tools they had. They come from that generation where you don't talk about feelings, and their parents came from that generation where you don't talk about feelings. So this doesn't condone what they did to us. It doesn't condone their parenting, but it allows me an intelligent lens to view their world and hold empathy for them. And it's how I was able to go through my life with forgiveness in my heart for them until I had to go into the dark night of the soul and really feel what had happened to me. I went through a lot of anger in that phase, but I released that as well in the last 4 years. So I was born in a cult. They joined cults in their teenage years and they met in the cult. It's one of the biggest cults that's still in existence today. I think they call themselves Family Christian United now, but they were called the Children of God back in the 70s when David Byrd put them together. And it was a sex cult. They were taught to sell their bodies for goods and services. They were trafficked. They were taught that you show the love of God through your body. And so when they both joined, they were moved off pretty quickly. They met in Puerto Rico. They had kids outside their marriage. There are 8 of us, and only 3 of us actually are shared between them because of the way that the cult operated. Um, the things that I remember were not all bad. I'm an optimist at heart, so I try to look at things from a positive perspective. Like, what did I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And that it was a growth mindset that was placed on me very early by my father, who was horrifically abused himself. And while he did abuse us as well, it wasn't in the same way and it wasn't as severe. And that doesn't take away from the fact that it was still abuse in some form or fashion, but he came from what he came from to what he did was a lot less. And so, we often blame our parents for stuff. And I tell people, you should feel what they did to you and grieve that and blame them if you need to. But at the same time, if you're going to blame them, you also have to take into account what happened to you and the skills that it gave you and how it helped you survive. And that's difficult for a lot of people to do, but that's the mindset process that I have and why I was able to overcome so much, because they were in Ecuador and didn't have a lot of money, and they started trafficking me pretty early. And that was a difficult realization to come to. And a lot of the evidence that we have over the years built up is pretty significant. And it's hard for me to reconcile that as a mom with my own kids, because I would never do that. And looking back, it's very obvious that the reason they did it was because they were poor and had no money, and they were taken advantage of by people in power there. So that continued to go on until I was 6. And then it continued to go on until I was 9 by people in the cult. I had a reprieve when we moved back to the United States because we were kicked out of the cult. And that reprieve was for a couple of years until another family member started to take advantage of me between 12 and 14. An older family member. So when my parents found out, they blamed me. They wanted me to apologize to him, and more abuse occurred that I'm not going to go into specifics because it's terrible. But it made me distance myself from my family because they were never safe. Growing up, they never kept me safe. My mother never kept me safe. And she came from a middle class white family. So before she went into the cult, she came from a middle class, wealthier family. So she knew what she was doing was wrong. And so she struggles with that. And I saw her struggle, and I see her struggle. Um, and it's hard for me to say because I love my family. And despite the mistakes that they've made, which are pretty heavy, it's difficult for me to know that she went through so much. And I pray for the fact that she needs to heal. So we were homeschooled. We were never allowed out of the house. We had some activities we were allowed to do occasionally, but the rest of the time, it was sequestration. I don't even know if that's a word, but we were sequestered in the house. And there was nobody watching us, or there were people feeding us, making sure we stayed on schedule, but there was nobody emotionally there and available. We lived in a big house with my cousins and my aunt and uncle, and my parents worked all the time. They tried to recreate the whole cult scene in the beginning when we first moved back and invited tons of people to live with us, and it was just chaos. It's part of where, not just from my childhood in South America, but my childhood in the United States was just chaos. The fighting, the yelling, the screaming. Both my aunt and my mother were screamers, unregulated nervous systems. My aunt still screams to this day. So it was really difficult for us. Most of the time, my whole childhood was about survival. What could I do to stay out of the way? What could I do not to be seen? Because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to be myself. It wasn't safe to have feelings. They would abuse us heavily with the spankings. I mean, it was abuse. When you leave bruises on your kids' bodies, that's abuse. And when you don't talk to them, and when you just only provide the basics of life, then you're leaving that child, leaving me, to come to all the conclusions on their own. And this was a double edged sword for me because it made me internalize all the negativity that happened as something that I did, something that was my fault, because that's what kids do. And it also made me hyper independent because I could not rely on my family. So growing up, I did a lot of things. Like after I became an independent person, I tried a lot of things. I did a lot of things, and I actually don't have any physical fear of anything at all. Most of the fear that I experience is unprocessed childhood trauma, and it gets into your fascia. And so, even as an adult, even after 4 years of intense, deep healing work, that fascia still has memories that can get triggered by situations, and those come up sometimes, and then I have to process those and move through it. um, I'm kind of telling the story as I tell you how I was processing it and how I've been processing it. It helps me move through the actual narrative of it. So I apologize if we keep getting lost, but um, I appreciate you sticking with me. Anyway, they tried to join some churches, and it really didn't work out because the churches pretty much it was a Bible Belt white part of Texas, and they were very prejudiced. And my father's Hawaiian, and I'm dark, so it was very prejudiced very early on. Um, my graduation was when I was 16, and so because we had school all year round, so there was nothing else to do. We were self-taught, so they expected us to go to college and start right away in college at 16, which was stupid and unreasonable. So I failed out of college, community college, like over and over again, because I had no idea about class structure. I had no idea how to be around other people, and my nervous system couldn't handle it. It was too hard and it was scary, and there was no transition, no one helping me. It was just me. So I beat myself up for that continuously as well. As an adult now, though, I look back and think the other side of it is I have 3 degrees now. So I pushed myself through without anybody's help, without anybody teaching me. I just banged my head against that wall over and over and over again until I graduated with my associate's degree, until I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and until I graduated with my master's degree. Like, I even have a push to go get my doctorate because that's how much I enjoyed school and being successful at that, because it was something that I taught myself. It was something that I worked for myself. So basically, what it boils down to is I was heavily abused in the beginning, physically, mentally, emotionally, by my family. And then as I started to work and be independent and be able to pay for my own things, I was able to move into a different part of my life. And I met my first husband, and I started working in EMS, and that saved me because I had been a victim my entire life. But when I went into EMS, my looks didn't matter. My past didn't matter. It was all about the emergency that was happening right then and there. So my first husband was a paramedic, and then I started doing 911 dispatch, and I had my EMT basics, so I worked in the ERs as, with patients, and then I also dispatched 911. And that gave me an out for my nervous system because I could handle anxiety under pressure, and I could be hyper vigilant, and I could multitask with my brain because of my upbringing and my nervous system. So not only did it save me because things weren't about my looks, they weren't about my body, they were about patience, they were about caring for people. It helped me move through my life focusing on something other than myself and what happened to me. And it's a double-edged sword, but when you are around other people that are highly sensitive and come from anxiety and trauma backgrounds, they really don't care what happened to you because shit's happened to them. So they're like, buck up, sister. Yeah, bad shit's happened to you. Join the party. And what I noticed in working in EMS was that mostly everybody that works in that type of environment comes from some form of traumatic childhood or abuse system or anxiety system. And they go into it because they can handle it. and that creates an environment to help other people that come into emergencies. And that's just a sidebar of how positive and negative things work and how I view things. But anyway, it really helped me focus. A lot of people that experience trauma and abuse at the level that I experienced it, they fracture, their minds fracture, their sense of self fractures, and mine did too. And they stay in a narrative of pain, of what happened to them, what happened to them, what happened to them. And working in EMS helped me focus that pain and focus that anxiety and hypervigilance into something that was helpful. And then it also helped me get through school and be able to focus and do many things at once. I had 3 kids. I was with my first husband for 8 years, and then I moved on immediately to my second husband, and we were together for over 20 years and had 2 kids together. And we worked opposite so that the kids didn't have to go into daycare, and he's also a paramedic. And I was able to do raising the kids, going to school, and being, a housewife and all that. I never got to see my husband, and I never actually got to sit still with myself because I ran so much. But I was able to accomplish quite a bit. At the same time, I was also denying myself and pushing away my pain, pushing away my past. I kept running from my past. I was running from, I didn't even know what, because I couldn't remember it. I couldn't feel it. I didn't know what was wrong. And because my parents had always entrained us to tell people lies about our past, to tell them lies about who we were, to tell them lies about all that, it fractured my sense of self. So I couldn't admit to myself that the reason that I was sick, the reason that I had all the problems, was because I was denying the truth and I was accepting shame on myself for something that I had no control over. Now, I did everything right. I went to school. I had 2 relationships. I tried to be the best mother, but it didn't matter because I wasn't experiencing any of it. I wasn't feeling any of it. There's so many memories that I was just not present for with my kids growing up. And it made me a good mother, but it also made me a disconnected mom. I cuddled the kids, I held them, I loved on them, but I didn't know how to emotionally articulate anything to them. All I had experienced in my life was a lot of negativity and no emotional explanation for anything. So I didn't have the tools that I needed to be the mom that I wanted to be. And so my kids are going to have to recover from that side of the generational trauma. I continued to work in EMS until 2019. And we traveled a lot. We went to different places, got different jobs. I was always running, trying to learn new things, accomplish things. And part of that was my curiosity for life. And the other part of it was running. And because I was always running, and because the only thing that I knew was trauma, I was constantly fighting with my significant other, constantly having friction because that was all I knew. I didn't know, and we didn't have the tools, neither one of us, to sit down and have a relationship, to talk things out, or to explain how we were feeling, because neither one of us knew how we were feeling. So in 2019, I quit EMS and I went into business for myself to learn marketing and internet marketing. And I started working for myself, and I did that for a couple of years until 2021 when I had an NDE. And in surgery, I saw that the reason that my life had been the way it was, and that I kept failing and I kept meeting challenges and I kept having things fall apart and I kept having trauma and stress, was because of my childhood. It was because I wasn't facing who I was. I wasn't facing what happened to me. I wasn't facing the things that made me fracture. My mother is a really big narcissist, and so that was also part of my challenges growing up. She denied all of our sense of self, and trauma already fragments your sense of self. So having somebody who's narcissistic and denies your reality because they can't handle theirs is really hard on a child, and it makes it incredibly difficult as an adult to define your sense of self. And after I woke up out of surgery and had my NDE, and I discovered that we are all one and that we are all spirit having an experience here on earth as humans, and that we're not our bodies, we are not our thoughts, we are not our brains, I started to be able to disconnect from the narrative. I started to be able to take a step back from when I was experiencing uncomfortable feelings in my body and recognize that those meant something, that those were talking to me. I did cognitive behavioral therapy, somatic therapy. I went through so much therapy and self discovery from 2021 until now that I was able to discover and take myself off everything that was hurting my body. So I discovered my body. I discovered where things were hiding. I learned about the body. I learned about spirit. And over 4 years, I was able to sit with the pain and sit with the things that had happened to me. It was not easy. It was incredibly difficult. I went into a deep dive into spirit, philosophy, neurobiology, neuroplasticity, and I'd already had a big history of psychology and child psychology because I took a lot of those classes in college. But I started to go into the science of the body more specifically, and the central nervous system and how it operates with the brain. And I paired that with my knowledge of spirituality and quantum physics. And together, I developed a way for me to be able to re-parent myself with cognitive behavioral therapy and my own blend of being able to learn about myself and knowing that I have ADHD and a form of highly functioning autism. Using all the different tools, I was able to see and figure out how the human body is responding to different cues, even things like frequency and vibration. Everything affects it. So it's a lot, but I've parsed it down and I've pieced it down to a point where I feel like I am able to explain it to people, and I can explain what I've gone through in hopes that it can give them a lens to feel and see what they're going through to heal. So after the last 4 years, I've come off all my medication. And what I struggle with now is honestly being myself. This is a new chapter in my life where I am embracing the parts of me that are lost and that want to come back together. And I'm embracing the healing journey. And I'm being honest with everything and feeling everything because that is the only way through. And I've discovered that if I want happiness, I have to make room in my central nervous system and then room in my soul for that. And that means feeling the past. That means working through the past and the feelings and grieving what I need to grieve and feeling what I need to feel. And most importantly, taking steps and taking action towards who I want to be, the things that I want to do, and the things that bring me happiness. Because that is the ultimate path to healing, is no longer rejecting yourself because you know yourself, you know the past, you know who you are, and you're finding out more. And you find out more as you travel, and you find out more on your journey, and you pick up more pieces and you try new things. And that's the scariest part, especially when you are stepping out alone and you're doing it on your own. But you can do it. Thank you for tuning in. I really hope that this helps. Next week, I'm going to start talking about spirit and how spirit is the way that you connect your mind and body. Thanks for tuning in.